This session today is all about how to get your ideal job, and it's a direct strategy that you can do in addition to all of the other things that you might be already doing in terms of finding your next ideal job. I'm going to skate over this because Beck's already covered a lot of this within the introduction. These are all the things that we do, but I think that is already covered. So really, ultimately, the objective for this session today is for you guys to have a framework and the confidence to develop your own direct job search strategy and help establish a clear way forward from the inside out. So why is it important in particularly in this market? Because I know it's very competitive at the moment, but generally this approach works in any marketplace. Why is it important? So I know that a lot of you here today are mid to senior HR, finance, and procurement specialists or generalists. And it's a very competitive market. I'm speaking to lots of candidates at the moment, and I know that if a role comes up, candidates. So, the importance of being able to stand out is really, really a key. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but there's obviously a huge volume of applications with that. So really what we wanted to do was encourage you to continue doing those things that you might be doing, which are probably going to include applying for job adverts, LinkedIn, connecting with recruiters, job boards, things like presenters that we're hoping to, make a real impact within the market. But also on top of that, an additional strategy where you're actually playing your game and not just the numbers game. So we're going to show you how to do that. So let's start off with a real life example. So during COVID, I'd recently gained, I think in 2019, I gained my exec coaching qualification then, and then COVID happened. And so recruitment, as we all know, in many areas completely died. And so I did loads of coaching during the lockdown period. And there was a candidate who I know very well. Let's call her Sue. I want to keep her anonymous. She was made redundant at the beginning of COVID, and she is a HR director. And she, at the beginning of COVID, there was still quite a lot of opportunity out there. She secured 3 final interviews after a 4-month period. And at her level, at HRD level, there was big presentations to do, really time consuming. She went for it, and unfortunately, for various reasons, she didn't secure any of those interviews. So at that point, she was like, Tansel, don't know what to do. I'm back to square one. I feel completely deflated. The market's even harder now. I don't know what to do. So we decided to have a few coaching sessions, and over the course of a few hours, we had a few conversations. Cut a long story short, we talked a little bit about what she was doing. We talked about what she loved to do. So one of the key things that came out for her was that she was really passionate about the environment. So she was an expert. She loved talking about it. She was an activist. And I just asked her the question, is that something that you would love to work within? And she said, absolutely yes. Is it something that you've explored? And she said, well, not really. I applied for one job for a company that offered a product or a service that benefited the environment, but I wasn't successful. So I just ran with the other processes that were moving forward. And I said, well, look, are there companies that you can think of that offer a product or a service that benefit the environment that you'd love to work for? And she said, yes, absolutely. And at that point, her whole sort of demeanor and body language changed. So she was like more upward, and you could see she was excited about something. And then we had to sort of work out what she was going to do next. And ultimately, what she decided to do was spend a bit of time doing some research, identifying 20 to 30 companies that all offered a product or a service that benefited the environment, and then have a targeted approach in terms of connecting with the most relevant people in those organizations that might be interested in her profile. And she was excited about that because it was different to what else she was doing. So everything else that she was doing was more from the outside in. So it was all job adverts or people talking to her about opportunities. This was something that she could actually have as an extra strand that she could then, as I said before, do from the inside out and have a bit more control of her process. So I actually posted a video onto LinkedIn in 2020 because she called me up and she said that she actually found a job doing this. So what happened was she connected with MDs and CEOs of these companies. She had a lovely story because she had that expertise, a natural kind of desire to work in that environment, and she caught the right person at the right time. And basically, the MD at the time, I think, said, "Oh, we're growing. We were just about to start thinking about looking for our first HR leader. Why don't you come in and have a chat?" She started off as an interim, and then she went permanent. And obviously, I'm saying HR as an example because that's my area of expertise. But I think the actual concept in itself applies to any industry sector that you might operate within. So yeah, she called me up, I put a video out, and basically then kind of put together this 6-step framework that will help you hopefully do that for yourselves if that's of interest to you. So what are the 6 steps? Well, the 6 steps are here. They're split essentially into 3 separate phases. The one that takes the most amount of time is phase 1, which is the mindset phase, and that's 1 and 2, where you're basically establishing your ideals and you're forming your story. That's going to be the large proportion of this presentation today, because steps 3 and 4, which are essentially the research phase, they're a bit more straightforward. And then steps 5 and 6, which is the engagement phase, we're going to just cover that off very quickly as well. So step 1, establish your ideals. So the whole point of this, if you're going to take the time out to proactively target companies that you've got some kind of connection or interest with, then I think you should aim high, right? There's no point in compromising on this one because you're probably going to compromise in some of the other job applications that you do. So be selective and have a clear focus. Think about what you also bring beyond your skills and experience. And what we're going to talk about a little bit now is not just relevant to this 6-step approach. It's also, I think there's a lot in there that's going to help you elevate and stand out in other interviews that you might be having as well. So the other key thing that hopefully you'll get from this as well is clearer positioning with recruiters. So I could go into each of these points in a lot of detail, but I'm going to try and rein myself in and be selective in terms of the examples that we have. And if you've got any questions about any of these things, then hopefully we're going to have some time at the end to talk through some of them. So where do you start? So in terms of, you want to really start with your non-negotiables, I suppose. So these will vary depending on your own personal situations. They could be determined about money, location, future plans. I mean, you might have a plan in 5 years to, let's say, set up your own business, and you kind of think it's important to get particular experience over the next few years to set you up for that. So these are the things like in terms of what you need. Now, in terms of getting to that 20 to 30 clients that you want to proactively target, there's some other ways of doing that as well. So I've given you the example of Sue, the environmentalist, and that comes under this next section. So that was an interest for her, but obviously you will all have different interests and passions and hobbies. You know, you might love eating McDonald's, and actually your dream job would be to work for there. Or you might wear particular brands, or you might like to go on cruises every year, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, do you know what? I've seen how they treat their employees. I reckon I could add some value here. So whatever it is that you love to do, whatever you know, brands that you love, then think about what they are, because you know straight away you're going to have some natural connection to those brands that you can then use when you start to engage with people in these businesses. So that's what you love doing. You might go down the capability route. So this could be, for example, you know, you've always worked in the healthcare sector. You love the healthcare sector. You're an expert in it. You want to remain within it. But for whatever reason, you're looking for a new challenge. So you really then focus maybe on healthcare businesses, because straight away you're going to be at the top of that list because you've got that industry experience. So you might choose just to focus on 25 healthcare businesses because that could be an easy way in for you. And also, you know, you're great at it. You could go down the cultural growth global route. I've kind of bundled these together because I didn't really want there to be too many points. Basically, I'll give you a nice example. There was a lady that I was talking to a couple of years ago. She was in India. She was moving over to the UK. All of her HR experience was within India. It's quite hard to break in at HRD level in the UK unless you've got UK experience. So we decided to help her with two different routes. So one route was she decided to look at which university. So she went to a university. She did a search against which people went to the same university that were in London. Went and started to connect with those guys because they were all working in different companies and sought their advice and guidance in terms of how they went down that same path. So also they were quite happy to maybe make some introductions as well. So there's that option, and the other option in that scenario was perhaps where um, uh, you could go down and actually explore a company that may be Indian owned, that has a base in the UK, because they might be interested in that experience, or it could be a global company that has a presence in India as well. So those were the two routes, and I think she ended up getting a job through one of those two routes. But equally, the same kind of things apply if you've got like language skills or whatever. So what makes you unique? Highly rated businesses, brands, CEOs. So these could be things that you're attracted to. So I don't know, you might actually follow a CEO that you are inspired by, and maybe you want to connect with them because actually you'd love to work with them. You might love certain brands or businesses because they are absolutely top class in terms of what they do. So there's lots of different reasons that you might want to connect. And you could use a combination of these things to form your top 20 to 30 businesses. Also, in terms of understanding yourself, I'm using this as an example. So this is as a sort of certified Hogan assessor. I tend to use personal assessments quite a bit. And this is what Hogan offer in terms of their motives, values, and preferences inventory. So these are all different things that candidates will prioritize in order of importance. I won't run through all of these things now, but I think if you look at these things, then maybe you can kind of understand a little bit more about what's important to you. And when you're looking at companies, how closely do they align to what's important to you, and what they can offer you? So that's something to look at as well. Right, now we're getting into a bit of depth now, and this is really going to help hopefully you guys with your interview prep as well. So if you've got any interviews coming up, then I suggest that you consider this too. So we find this a lot. So recruiting for senior HR roles, this is where a lot of candidates fall down, because a lot of candidates in the HR space, at least, will have all kind of similar relevant technical experience. Where candidates make a difference is, how they apply that experience to what business cycle the company's in. So if you're approaching clients or if you've got interviews with them, I would say this is definitely one of the things that you should try and understand about them before you go into the interview. And the reason for this as well is I know many of you on the call at the moment are senior candidates. You've probably got 10 to 20 years experience. And so often candidates struggle at interview stage because, there's going to be particular things that each of you are really proud of, like amazing achievements that you've done that have been absolute game changers in your past. And I've seen candidates want to really shoehorn those into an interview, regardless of how relevant it might be. And I would say never do that. You've got to try, and you've got so much experience there. It's all about digging out the right examples that are relevant to the company you're going for. So if you know a little bit more about what business lifecycle stage the company's in, then focus on those examples, because if a company is going through growth, let's say, and you want to bring in an example about how you've helped a company downsize and restructure and streamline, that might not be too relevant. So really think about, like, what business life cycle stage is that company in, and what are the most relevant examples can I bring from my experience? So you've got your startups, your evergreens, your rescues, your growths, your renovations, and there's probably others as well. Then you can start to consider where are they in terms of their market positioning. Because again, you might want to align your experience to where they are, and also it shows an amazing kind of amount of research as well in terms of understanding where they might be. So, are they a leader in their business? Are they a challenger? Are they a new entrant? Are they an ever present? Again, you may have worked for companies that have gone through these different things. So, ensure that you're bringing the most relevant examples where you can as well. Then you can think about the ownership structure, because every company will work in a very different way, and again, you might want to align your examples to what they're currently in as well. So it's all about using your experience to prepare and then bring out the most relevant examples from your career. So a little takeaway for you guys then is to really think about these questions. In which life cycle market ownership environment do you have the most experience? And then I'm not going to run through the rest, but you may choose to target companies that fit this criteria, but also apply this logic and process, I guess, to any interviews that you might have as well. So that's step one. Just going to have a quick sip of water before we progress. Two, forming your stories. So hopefully you've now got into a situation where you know what types of businesses that you might want to work within. Now you need to be able to then, if you are going to approach these businesses, have some kind of connection, right? One of the worst things that I have seen or interview feedbacks that come back from clients is, you know, clients have candidates have gone to jobs. They've kind of been asked, why do you want to work for us? And some candidates might say, well, it's a job that I think I can do. I've done it before. I'm available. It's a good location, right? I think employers, when it's a competitive marketplace, they are looking generally for a lot more than that. They want to have some kind of you to have some kind of connection with what they're doing beyond those kind of obvious components. So this is where you've really got to kind of bring out, what else about the company is attractive to me. So we're going to talk a little bit about why your story is important, the elevator pitch, how you can win a 50-50 battle. And there's a great example actually. So I'm sure many of you have probably been victim to the classic kind of, you're in the final two, but unfortunately you've lost out to the other candidate, but you were appointable. And this has happened to me, not me personally, but my candidates about 4 or 5 times, where a client has said to me, look, there were 2 candidates, I couldn't make the difference between them. One of the candidates ended the interview by saying, how much she enjoyed the experience, how that she's got 4 other interviews, but this is absolutely at the top of her list because of X, Y, and Z. And no matter what happened, she really sort of wanted to keep in touch. But if she was offered the job, she would absolutely accept it. And, she would do everything she could to really help the company achieve its goals. And the client said to me, look, I had one candidate that said that, and the other candidate just said, thank you for your time. And that's basically how I made my decision. And sometimes it is as simple as that, I suppose. I'm not saying you should say that at the end of every interview, but where it's genuine and appropriate, then consider some kind of, final kind of statement, I suppose, in terms of the end of the process. So hopefully what makes you unique as well. And then what are you offering beyond your skills and experience? And I've sort of covered that, I think, already. So how can you form your story? So what kind of questions should you be asking yourself? So I'm not going to run through all of these. You can see them here. And obviously, if you we'll give a free pack out at the end of the session as well. So you've got this presentation. But I often ask these questions to the people that we hire as well, because, for me, I think it tells a lot about a person's attributes. And I think the other thing that I think is worth sharing as well is, a lot of candidates will go into some kind of robotic, formal, professional mode during interview. Now, obviously, there is a certain level of professionalism that you need to demonstrate in an interview scenario. But I think it's really important as well that, the employer, and vice versa as well, and you see this from the employer, that you see some kind of authenticity. about that they see that authenticity about you. So whilst obviously you'll need to satisfy certain technical requirements from a skills perspective, try and maybe where it's appropriate and where you're comfortable, try and bring in a few personal situations, not a few, maybe just one or two or whatever, that really demonstrate maybe how you've overcome adversity, how kind of like you've had some challenges and how you've overcome them, and show a little bit of your personal side. And with each of these scenarios as well, whatever you choose to share, it's going to hopefully demonstrate that you are a little bit more resilient, a little bit more focused or driven or whatever it might be. Because sometimes it's hard to get that just from kind of work examples. So make sure you satisfy the skills and the experience, but also, blend that in with some kind of personal stories that might just differentiate you a little bit and help you stand from the crowd in terms of, like for like skill sets. Well, this is actually quite. This is. I would encourage you all to check this out. Actually, so being a coach, there are certain coaches that I follow. Rich Litvin is one of those. His style isn't for everyone, but I get a lot out of it. There is a YouTube video. I've checked it today to see if it's still live. It is there. It actually is a whole session about Rich working with one of his clients who has just left a corporate job and is looking to set up his own um, business of some sort. And it's all about like how he can position himself, what makes him unique. Gets quite emotional. It's half an hour. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. And let me know if you get anything out from it if you do watch it as well, because I've had some good feedback from it in the past. So do a search for that. And then another way to actually find out a little bit more about yourself could be to ask your friends, family, or colleagues some of these questions from before. Really sort of trying to maybe, don't be afraid to request some deeper information from any references or testimonials that you get as well. And a little exercise that you could potentially do is really kind of, and especially if you're going to target companies, is what values are important to you, right? And when you're doing your research with these businesses, you can see if there is some kind of connection. But, obviously we know that sometimes values are just there and they're not necessarily things that are embedded in an organization, but sometimes they are. And actually, the more companies we work with, the more we're seeing that. And I think if you can resonate with those values and actually talk about those at some point in the interview process and what they mean to you, and how they're applied within that business, there's another way to sort of connect with the business and stand out from the crowd. And there's a couple of links here that have big sets of values there that you could actually spend a bit of time over a coffee going through, and working out what's important to you and what they mean to you. And it's useful from a personal branding perspective, I believe. And then there's a book that well, actually, I think I had the Audible, Peak Performance. It's more sports orientated, but there's a really good section about values and purpose and how you can integrate that into your own personal brand and apply that, I guess, to any interview processes or approaches that you're making with companies. So form your story. So here's like a few little examples in terms of how you could sort of translate that information. Again, not going to go through that right now. It's something for you to sort of refer to perhaps in your own time. Ways to identify companies. There's obviously lots of different regional business groups. The one local to us is the Gatwick Diamond. But I'm sure wherever you live, you'll have those different groups, and you can actually find lots of company lists as well on those lists. So you could then obviously target, if location is important to you or whatever, you could target companies that way. You might want to target startup companies. So you could find lists in terms of the fastest growing companies. You can find companies that have recently secured investment. You can look at companies that have won industry awards. If you want to go for a leader, then you go for those top companies that have won awards recently. You might want to go for a great place to work list and go through companies that way. Or as I say, you can connect with your LinkedIn connections to see where they're working, and approach it that way. In terms of doing your research as well, there's other tools. So you can look at things like Glassdoor, which is obviously like a TripAdvisor for employees. You can look at things like Companies House for director and accounts data, company website. social media. But this is the other bit. I would say lots of trade press and stuff like that. So loads of creative searches to see where they are as a business. And that's going to help you identify, going back a few slides, where they are positioned as a business. So you can then tailor your examples more effectively when you engage with them. And there's a few other options here as well, but I'm sure there's loads more that you could add to that. So, ultimately, what you want to do once you've found your companies is identify what's your connection, um, values, transcending purpose, ideal story. What are their challenges as a business, opportunities and plans? What kind of reputation do they have? Who do they already have with your skill set? Who do you know works there? Why do they need you? Again, all comes back to that. Okay, so you've found your companies. Now we need to find the contacts within those companies. Step 4. So this is fairly straightforward, to be honest with you. It's quite easy now to find these people. I would suggest exploring 4 possible types of contacts if you're going to connect with people within an organization. So who would be your potential manager? So obviously that's relevant, dependent on your role. Worth approaching your manager's manager, I think, if you can work out who that is, because you never know if the information that you're seeing on LinkedIn or on websites is up to date. And actually, we do get quite a lot of work from clients who, for whatever reason, want us to do sensitive searches because maybe the person in the role isn't working out. So there's always that way of doing things as well. They may have left already. Who knows? Connect with the internal recruiter. It's a good touch point to ask who the most relevant person is to speak to in the organization. Or generally, like HR leaders will know or should know, I guess, what's happening across the organization as well. So you've got a few different routes to make those engagement contacts with. So, yep, you can find out who these people are either through their About Us section on their website. You might already know somebody that works there, LinkedIn searches, and then that's easier to even do if you've got a recruiter account as well. And actually, I think Faye, in the previous coaching session last month, which you can still access, it will be on our YouTube Presenters 15 channel. And there's a lot more detail in terms of how to use LinkedIn effectively. That covers a wide variety of things. So we're just building that up at the moment. So do feel free to and we're going to post this up there as well. So you'll be able to refer back to this as well. So step 4, actually, it should be step 5. So slight typo there. So step 5 is connect. The clearer you are on your ideal story and the businesses you want to work for, the more confident you'll be. LinkedIn, make sure your profile is fully optimized. Think about your brand. This is also what Presenters is all about. I did have this week we've had interviews, and I had a client that checked somebody's LinkedIn profile and they didn't progress with her because she had a couple of typos. And they said that the attention to detail in the role was very important. So even a couple of typos on the LinkedIn profile can rule you out. So beware. And look, treat things like LinkedIn and what we're trying to do with Presenters as well is it's a place where you have your brand, right? And I know that this might not be natural for everybody, but like it or not, clients are looking at things like that more now. So really optimize your profiles wherever you've got them. Content consistent with your story. So it needs to be reflective of what you're saying, and comment, engage in relevant posts and groups. I know some of you are doing that now anyway, and seek out relevant influential people that you know don't know. Here's an example of an approach that you might make. Let's say you are now approaching a contact within a company that you would love to work for. Let's read this out. I'm looking for my dream HR leader role and have shortlisted 20 companies that I would love to work for. Nebula is at the top of that list because I love that your product makes such a positive impact on the environment. Such is my passion for the environment and excitement for your business. I've already put together a high-level people plan based on what I know about your business and would love to share it with you. Now, I'm not saying that you have to put people plans or big, plans in place for every company that but something like that. Imagine if you were in a role and somebody approached you with that kind of connection request. Do you think you'd have more inclination to actually at least engage with them to some extent, as opposed to just somebody that says, hi, looking for a new role, wondering if you've got anything. So it's about sort of positioning and thinking about how creative you can be in terms of making those connections. Right, so step 6, I will caveat everything that I've said with there is absolutely no guarantees of success. I would suggest that you need to be really resilient with this and have 7 forms of engagement. That's what they say it takes to make a, think of this as not as sales necessarily, because that might put you off, but this is you project managing your own career, right? And be bold and creative, try new things. Success is a succession of failures. Can't remember who said that. Was that Churchill? Operate at your own pace. Apologies for the typo there. You're in control. And project manage the strategy and design a system that works for you. So I know a lot of people like to use spreadsheets or whatever, but have this information in a trackable way that you can hold yourself. And maybe there's a way. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and actually she was telling me that she's buddied up with somebody else that I know's here today. And actually, this could be something. If you buddy up with somebody else, then a nice way to hold yourselves to account to each other and support each other. What I would say is, there are going to be things that derail what you're trying to do. Be aware of those. Make the most of this time. Obviously, if you're looking for jobs, try and blend it with, enjoying your search. And also, I suppose, one of the things that I always say is, job search can be really deflating. I know that. But if you're doing this approach, at least it feels like you're doing something constructive as well. It may not even pay off straight away. It might pay off in 6 months or 12 months because you're making connections. So, I think there's plenty of positives to approaching the market in this way.